be allowed more latitude than other members in asking his questions. I call Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I too commend our education sector for the courageous and dedicated leadership that it has shown throughout the pandemic, and for the resilience shown by our families across Northern Ireland. We welcome news of school return with open arms. However, Mr. Speaker, in addition to when school will return, it is also of great importance as to how. Pupils in schools were initially told that there will be exams this year, and schools were advised do not therefore over-assess. Of course, however, exams have since been cancelled, although recent guidance has told schools that assessment conducted in controlled conditions will have higher value as evidence in centre-determined grades. As a result of that, I'm receiving reports from distressed pupils advising that schools that took that initial guidance are now scheduling multiple controlled assessments, some of which has been referred to as an assessment blitz. This at a time when advice is that school return should focus on emotional regulation, not testing. So can I ask the Minister how such a situation has been allowed to transpire, and what he will do to ensure that mental health as well as assessment is protected?
Thank the Chair for his questions. It is the case that with the cancellation of exams, that the only other process is some form of assessment. A tool has been made available by way of assessment resources, but it has also been made very clear by CCA in terms of the guidance given to schools. That should be something that is not overly used, and indeed myself in terms of and the Chief Executive of CCA earlier on this week did a question and answer session which will go out as well on social media in addition to the guidance. Because I think there will be some schools who may seek to over-assess in relation to that. And so talk, I think, that in some schools of them trying to schedule in 40 assessments, for instance, is something that is way over the top, and they shouldn't be going at that level on it. It is the case that there is no, and so therefore it is about something that is proportionate. Indeed, even the assessment tools that are being put in place for schools are voluntary for the schools to operate. They're not an issue of compulsion on that basis, but effectively one other opportunity where schools can do that. It is the case that simply moving from an exam situation to something which is robust in terms of assessment, which is evidence-based in terms of assessment, which will be accepted, for instance, by universities and future by employers, there is no easy way of that simply being a very light touch regime in which there is no level of assessment take place. So there does need to be a balance struck. But I think there will be some that will overinterpret that, and I think we want to make it clear that there will be a limited level, there should be a limited level of assessment that schools are using to be able to produce that level of evidence.
Supplementary, Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Minister for that response, and we'll explore that in more detail at the Education Committee. Can I ask the Minister what, if any, contingency planning is occurring for post-primary transfer next year in order to avoid the distress that has been caused by a chaotic process faced by pupils this year?
Well, I'll be happy to work. It does lie a little bit outside the particular remit of the statement of the ad hoc today. However, look, it is the case, as indicated, we're working with others to see whether there's any pathways that can be suggested that will be easier. I know, sort of along with others, for instance, I would be supportive, if at all possible, for those tests to take place within within primary schools, and I'd be happy to talk to stakeholders along with that. And I know there's been considerable effort around that. It is the case that in terms of legally the criteria that will be set by schools and whether they use academic selection or don't, or the format, is legally a matter for those. It is not something which the Department is in a position to impose. And it is also the case, as was mentioned a little bit in the debate that we had on Tuesday as regards the broader issue of post-primary provision in South Belfast, which naturally enough I think probably every speaker eventually touched upon the issue of post-primary transfer, that without any form of academic selection there is a concern that schools will then fall back on other criteria which people will also see as being unfair, be it in terms of even the use of siblings. And we want to reach a situation where, in terms of those schools, that at least everybody has some level of chance within that. It is also the case that across the board, not just for that year's, I want to see the executive backup programme of an engaged programme which will lead then to a level of academic recovery. That's something that goes well beyond where P6 and P7 are, but across all the years as well.
I call Robin Newton.